the negative itself is probably one of my most prized possessions. It was in the second half of the game, so I was down in the north end zone of the stadium. I had also positioned myself behind the play so that I was facing the Cardinals defense, ready to capture with them making any plays facing towards me. Unfortunately, I was blocked by other players, so I really didn't get any shots of the action. But as it happened, I kept following him. Then all of a sudden, boom, it happened. They say a photo's worth 1,000 words. But in my mind, this photo emphasizes just one word: passion.
Passion is kind of an important word for me, whether it's, playing sports or whether it's, just living or whatever you're going to do. In my opinion, you should be passionate about it, or else why do it?
Some photos, they last a millisecond, and that's what's amazing with the photo that I took of Pat Tillman, is that what happened in a millisecond now lives on for eternity.
After Pat Tillman's death, this image became iconic. But for those who knew him, Tillman was much more than a figure cast in bronze. And all these years later, they are still haunted by his death.
How do you try and get into somebody's head and figure out how they would want to be remembered? You say patriot? Can we say hero? How about just a great human being? How about we start there?
Over 700 U.S. soldiers killed in the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. The latest from the world of sports. One of the brightest stars to ever step on, then step off the football field.
Pat Tillman, determined to do something following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, has died.
The facts show clearly that there was no cover-up.
We took the Tillman family's nightmare and made it worse. We failed them.
It's shameless. Not only did they lie to us, they lied to the whole country.
We weren't told anything other than just shut up, don't talk about it.
People are carrying around an awful lot of shame that probably doesn't belong to them.
Real suicidal thoughts. Guys telling you, I put the 45 up to my head with the hammer cocked back.
How can we learn to live each day with the appreciation that it's a gift and that there are people like Pat that aren't here to live it?
Pat Tillman was born in 1976 and raised in the village of New Almaden, California, about 10 miles from downtown San Jose. Patrick Tillman Sr. and Dannie Tillman had 3 boys. Pat was the oldest.
He was a really active little kid. He didn't want to be swaddled. He didn't like to really be held. He just wanted to take off. Kevin and Pat were 14 months apart. And Richard is 4 years younger than Pat and 3 years younger than Kevin. So they were very close. They did everything together.
When did it start becoming clear that Pat was a special kind of athlete?
Not right off. He could climb. He was very strong. He could do flips. He'd hold on to these ropes and he'd flip when he was like 3. And so we knew he had that in him.
His freshman year, Pat wanted to make the varsity baseball team. He was a catcher, and he was like 5'5" and maybe $1.25. So we said, Pat, be on the JV team. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He says, I'm going to go in the weight room, get strong, and I'm going to play Division I football one day.
At Leland High School, Tillman developed into a 3-year starter on the varsity football team. and a dynamic two-way player.
This season, everyone's watching Tillman. Here are the stats: 562 receiving yards, 428 rushing yards, and 20 touchdowns. On defense, he's the leading tackler with 85 tackles and 8 sacks.
In 1993, Tillman would lead the Leland Chargers to their first sectional title in 21 years. Just as Tillman had predicted, he got a Division I football shot. Arizona State head coach Bruce Snyder offered him the program's last available scholarship.
He exuded extreme confidence in himself. When Coach Snyder wanted to redshirt him, he said, "Don't do that, because I'm leaving in 4 years, so you're going to miss a year of me playing. So don't redshirt me, put me on the field now, because I'm going to graduate and I have plans."
Pat Tillman, who came in for Bandarahi.
Thrown for a loss by Pat Tillman.
Intercepted. This is Pat Tillman.
He might have been the greatest student athlete in Arizona State history. He was a Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year, and he was an academic All-American. That's a hard combo.
When Tillman was a junior, the Sun Devils went 11-0 in the regular season.
We kicked the out of him, baby!
They won the Pac-10 title and nearly won the Rose Bowl and national title. Tillman would graduate in 3.5 years with a 3.84 GPA. His sights were set on the NFL, but as a 5'11", 200-pound linebacker lacking elite speed, the odds were against him. But late in the 1998 draft, with the Arizona Cardinals on the clock,
that Tillman pick's going to be a popular one down there in the Valley of the Sun. Absolutely. I think he's a kid who's going to project from linebacker to safety. Tough kid, great special teamer. Pat Tillman will play in this league.
2 days after the draft, my secretary comes in and says, "Coach Mack, Pat Tillman's out here and would like to see you. Do you have time for him?" And I went, "Well, absolutely I do." He said, "Coach Mack, I know why you drafted me. I'm a local guy, and I know you probably think I will be a special teams player for you." He said, "If you'll just spend some damn time with me, I'll be your starting safety."
Pat must have gotten in 2 or 3 fights every day. And it happened over and over and over and over again, to the point where people started to just take notice, and they knew this kid was, like, for real.
Tillman did become a Cardinals starter at safety and a force on special teams.
He was a movie character. You know, he was like someone you would just gravitate towards watching on big screen. There he was, running down with his arms out. He didn't have perfect form or know how to do it. He just had a knack for getting to the ball and making a play.
After a career high in tackles in his 3rd season, Tillman was a restricted free agent. The St. Louis Rams offered him a 5-year, $9 million contract to leave the Cardinals.
I said, "Pat, this is the business. I understand the business. I've been in it a long time." He said, "Mac, you guys were the only people that believed in me when I came out of Arizona State." He said, "For me to leave now, just for money, that's BS. I'm staying with you."
The 2001 season would be Tillman's 4th in the NFL. Opening day was Sunday, September 9th. But the Cardinals were off. 2 days later.
Oh my God.
This is at the World Trade Center. Obviously a major fire there, and there has been some sort of explosion.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. That looks like a second plane.
New York's World Trade Center, in effect, has been destroyed.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
In the public relations office, they had a television. Pat Tillman is just sitting in front of that television set, just transfixed on everything that's going on. Just sat there.
One day after the 9/11 attacks, Pat Tillman shared his thoughts.
You don't realize what it gives you. You don't realize how great a life we have over here. Even as athletes, we bitch and moan every now and again about this or that. And if we ever just, times like this, you stop and think about just how, not only how good we have it, but what kind of a system we live under, what freedoms were allowed. My great-grandfather was at Pearl Harbor, and a lot of my family has given up, has gone and fought in wars, and I really haven't done a damn thing as far as laying myself on the line like that. And so I have a great deal of respect for those that have and what the flag stands for.
Watching the firemen and what they did, the heroics there, and I think it was humbling for him. And he just kind of felt, he and Kevin and a multitude of other young men and women were motivated by that.
When the 2001 season ended, Tillman became a free agent. The Cardinals offered him a 3-year deal for $3.6 million. Far less than what he turned down from the Rams to stay with Arizona a season earlier. Some say he was disillusioned. Regardless, football was clearly no longer his priority. In May 2002, he married his high school sweetheart, Marie. And he was about to do something else.
I got a call from him. And he said, Coach Mack, I need to come see you. So I think he's coming to see me about the contract. He got his chair, came right around, sat like this with me, behind my desk, looking at me face to face. And he said, I've got something to tell you.
And a retirement story unlike all others, Cardinals safety, 25-year-old Pat Tillman putting his young NFL career on hold to join the U.S. Army.
How did you find out that Pat had made this decision, and Kevin?
On Mother's Day. On Mother's Day, they contacted me and they called me because I guess they were worried that someone else would tell me. I don't know, but they told me that they had enlisted, which was, hard to swallow. And we did talk to them, to try to talk them out of it, but there was none of that. They weren't going to be talked out of it.
The moment he enlisted, Pat Tillman became the most famous soldier in the U.S. Army. In story after story, he was hailed as a hero. But Tillman recoiled from the praise.
He didn't give any interviews to anybody. I mean, he didn't want to be held in any higher regard than anyone else who enlisted.
There were a few times people requested through our public affairs officer to try and talk to him. He didn't want to be looked at as a poster boy. I think for Pat, it was him wanting to blend in more with us. That's how Pat was day to day.
Tillman and his brother Kevin had signed contracts to serve together in one of the military's most elite units, the Rangers.
The 75th Army Ranger Regiment that Pat Tillman and his brother Kevin were parts of. That's the finest light infantry in the world, finest light infantry in the world. And they were sent over there early, sent on the most dangerous missions.
When the Tillman brothers enlisted, the U.S. was at war in Afghanistan. But soon Americans were also fighting in Iraq, which the U.S. accused of stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. And it was to Iraq, not Afghanistan, that the Tillman brothers were first deployed.
I think at that point he was really disgusted because when they got over there, he just said flat out, this is illegal, what we're doing over here. And they...
No WMDs.
No.
Yeah.
And just the way we were bombing over there and behaving over there, it didn't sit well with him or with Kevin or with many of the guys over there. It was frightening to the whole family to have them both over there.
In March 2004, a year after returning home from Iraq, the Tillman brothers were deployed to Afghanistan.
We went to the warning order brief that we received as a battalion at Fort Lewis. The slideshow basically said, you know, your job is to go and find UBL, Osama bin Laden.
A few days after they arrived, the Black Sheep, as the Tillman brothers' platoon was known, were sent on a mission near the border with Pakistan in search of weapons and enemy fighters.
Most of the time, to be honest, a lot of these villages, we got close. There were no fighting-age males there. It was usually just women and children.
It didn't feel like we were going to be finding bin Laden the way that we were looking for him. It sure felt like we were driving around hoping that we'd get shot at, and then that would create intelligence by which we could then go forth and find the bad guys.
For about a week, the Black Sheep operated near the border without incident. That changed on April 22nd, 2004. In California, Dannie Tillman received an urgent message to call Pat's wife, Marie.
I was just terrified, and so I kind of paced around, terrified to call her. I called, she answered like she always does. You know, she had that little lilt in her voice. And then she didn't say anything. And then I said, Marie, what's wrong? And she just said, he's dead. And I said, who's dead? And she said, Pat's dead.
Over 700 U.S. soldiers killed in the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. The latest from the world of sports. One of the brightest stars to ever step on, then step off the football field.
Pat Tillman, determined to do something following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, has died.
Boy, that was tough. Because I couldn't imagine it happening to Pat.
It was really hard to just fathom, like, he's not coming back. Damn it. It was my worst nightmare came true, that he wouldn't make it back.
On May 3rd, 2004, in San Jose, a memorial service was held and broadcast live on national television.
3,000 people have come to this memorial service. Some who'd never even met Pat Tillman have been waiting out here in the sun for about 3 hours just to pay their respects.
Pat's unencumbered zeal for life will never be forgotten.
Steve White, a Navy SEAL and a friend of the Tillman brothers, was among the eulogists. Working from an account provided by the Army, he described Pat Tillman's final moments.
He made the call. He dismounted his troops, taking the fight to the enemy. Pat sacrificed himself so his brothers could live.
They just said that he had run up this ridge line trying to protect the serial coming through, and, you know, he was shot by the enemy and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, there's something kind of off about all of this.
Dannie Tillman was right. But it would be more than a month before the military would reveal the awful truth.
It's shameless. Not only did they lie to us, I mean, they lied to the whole country.
Did you look at the flag maybe a little differently today, and maybe with more, more patriotism and more feeling with regards to just looking at a flag, which you can kind of see around anywhere?
I imagine I'll probably have a few other things to think about now that this is going on. Maybe it'll be a fireman running up those stairs. So there'll be a lot of things running through my head. I don't know what it will be, but fortunately, it'll be running through my head, and I'm out going to play a football game, which seems, I mean, it is insignificant compared to everything that's taken place.
8 months after this interview, Pat Tillman gave up his NFL career to become an Army Ranger. Less than 2 years after enlisting, he was killed in combat in Afghanistan at the age of 27.
Soldiers have always fascinated me, partly because of the sense of honor that they represent, but mostly because of the sacrifices that they make. Pat Tillman exemplified this sacrifice as much as anyone I've ever met. In the prime of his youth, he voluntarily and without hesitation put aside his own personal dreams and ambitions so that others could have the luxury of pursuing theirs.
3 days after Pat Tillman's death, his fellow Rangers held a memorial service in Afghanistan.
Everybody's there, they do the roll call, and it was hard. A lot of guys couldn't hold it together.
Sound off the roll call. Specialist Norman. Here, First Lord. Specialist Tillman. Specialist Patrick Tillman. Specialist Patrick Daniel Tillman.
In those moments of silence, I don't know if there's a more effective way of punctuating the reality that somebody who should be here isn't.
At Tillman's public memorial in California, the world heard the military's version of how Tillman died. But a few weeks later, the truth came out.
A military investigation by U.S. Central Command into the circumstances of the 22 April death of Corporal Patrick Tillman is complete. While there was no one specific finding of fault, the investigation results indicate that Corporal Tillman probably died as a result of friendly fire while his unit was engaged in combat with enemy forces.
Well, there's lots of reasons they realized they had to tell us. First, the guys were going to come back and they were going to start talking because the troops knew what happened. They also had to tell us because the coroner would not sign the autopsy because they didn't believe he was killed by the enemy based on his wounds. So they were forced to tell us.
What actually happened on April 22nd, 2004? It all started with a disabled Humvee. The Black Sheep, Tillman's platoon, wanted to blow it up or have it flown out by helicopter. But officers at headquarters, more than 40 miles away, ordered it to be towed.
And the word came back, it's like, no, you're taking that vehicle with you.
I wasn't happy with it. For me, that puts the platoon more at risk. What if something happens here? We're in the open. We've got nowhere to go. We've got no support. And we've got this vehicle. We got to get out of here.
I just remember it was kind of a show, to be honest with you. We're sitting there, and we see a group of guys sitting in this village, and everybody's spider sense, and hairs on the back of your neck start sticking up.
Despite significant pushback from the platoon leader, headquarters made another crucial decision. The platoon would now be split into two convoys. One would tow the Humvee. The other would proceed to a village a few miles away.
My feeling was I was going to be more surprised if something bad didn't happen, because it just felt like at that point we were really asking for it.
Telling them to go and drag that Humvee didn't make sense. Splitting the platoon didn't make sense.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Pete Blaber, a longtime commander in the Ranger Regiment and with the elite Delta Force, spent years investigating Pat Tillman's death.
You're splitting your combat power in half. There's no longer strength to support each other, to come help each other out. And then perhaps even bigger, especially on the final outcome, was you have arbitrarily broken apart the chain of supervision within the platoon.
Following orders, the first convoy, which included Pat Tillman, set off for the village, which could only be reached through a narrow, steep canyon.
When we were driving through that slot canyon, right, we looked at each other. We kind of at the same time, it was like, this would be a perfect place for an ambush.
The second convoy, with a local truck driver towing the Humvee, headed in a different direction, but the road they were on proved impassable. So the Rangers changed course and followed the same route as the first convoy, into the canyon.
There's boulders, rocks, uneven terrain. There's mountains on all sides, so you're basically going down. It looks almost like a ravine.
You feel like you're in a coffin. You just want to get out of that, and you can't. You're stuck. You're driving at whatever the pace this vehicle can go.
The next thing you know, I hear a loud boom.
The second convoy was under attack by enemy fighters.
When I saw that explosion and I saw, the boulder coming down the hill, I was convinced that's where I was going to die. Because we were very much fish in a barrel.
It was some of the loudest noises I've ever heard. If you've ever heard a heavy machine gun fire, it's deafening already, so to be trapped in that canyon, it was deafening.
And you're in a canyon where people are firing thousands of rounds. There's guys in my vehicle whose ears were bleeding.
By the time the second convoy was ambushed, the first convoy had already emerged from the canyon.
We hear the first explosion, and literally everybody looks at each other and goes, "Oh, what was that?"
And then you start hearing gunfire and more explosions, and you're like, this is real, this is happening.
And so we're on the radio trying to report, like, hey, we got troops in contact. No comms at all.
Hoping to direct fire at the enemy, Pat Tillman split off from his fellow Rangers.
Lowest man on the totem pole, you just look for your leader. And I look for Pat, and I see Pat moving, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna follow him.
Tillman, Private Bryan O'Neal, and an allied Afghan soldier named Syed Farhad were now on their own, exposed, without cover.
When I saw the Humvees coming through, and then the shooting from them onto our position, it was instantaneous. Like, these are friendlies, and they're shooting at us right now, and that's terrifying.
In the fading light, a sergeant in the second convoy misidentified Farhad as the enemy and shot at him. 3 other Rangers in the same vehicle, including Private Steven Elliott, then fired as well.
There was a figure, and you just see muzzle flashes. He's over here to the right of us by 70, 80 meters. And you couldn't tell if he was shooting at you or what he was shooting at, but he was definitely standing up and shooting. It couldn't possibly be anybody other than a bad guy. Because in my mind, the idea of there being friendlies anywhere around us on that ridgeline would have been as foreign to me as, one of my relatives being on that ridgeline. It would be an impossibility.
But it was friendlies, and Farhad was killed in a hail of bullets. Tillman, meanwhile, tried to signal to his platoon mates to cease fire. He set off a smoke grenade, but they kept shooting.
That's when I heard people yelling for a medic. So I knew something was wrong. Someone else said, hey, we have a friendly KIA. And then when I walked up, somebody goes, hey, it's Pat. In my mind, I knew right away. I knew it was friendly fire, just from talking amongst the platoon.
When Pat Tillman was killed in Afghanistan on April 22, 2004, there was little doubt about what had happened. But in the aftermath, the platoon was ordered to keep quiet.
We weren't told anything other than just shut up, don't talk about it.
Who told you to shut up?
It was from the chain of command. I don't know exactly where it came from. So, but it was like, hey, don't talk about this to anybody.
Tillman's brother, Kevin, who was at the rear of the second convoy, wasn't aware of how Pat died, and his platoon mates were ordered not to tell him. For more than a month, Kevin and the rest of the Tillman family, as well as the public, heard only the false narrative that Pat had been killed by the enemy.
The truth is what you tell first to people. That's what sticks. It takes years to get that narrative out of their head, and they know that. They know that that first story is what's going to stick to the majority of people.
Shortly after Tillman's death, he was awarded the Silver Star for valor. The citation stated he had died under devastating enemy fire. It was approved by Brigadier General Stanley McChrystal. But the next day, McChrystal sent a classified memo up the chain of command. He said, "It is anticipated highly possible that Corporal Tillman was killed by friendly fire."
Pat deserved more than a Silver Star. And the saddest fact behind it, not only was it a false narrative, which was unnecessary, but Dannie and Pat's family can't even be proud of that Silver Star because what was said for it to be awarded was a lie.
Dannie Tillman decided to fight for the truth. She would spend the better part of the next 2 decades in search of answers, maintaining through several government investigations that she wasn't getting the whole story.
To write these glorious tales is really a disservice to the nation, and the nation needs to realize this is an ugly war. Everyone should be part of it. Everyone should understand what's going on. And we shouldn't be allowed to have smoke screens thrown in our face. They loaded us with so much information. They didn't think we'd read it. It's not enough to call him a hero. And that's what they didn't understand. He was more important than the accolades, and they thought that they could shut us up by throwing accolades at him. It's remarkable.
Why have you been so relentless?
Well, because Patrick would be. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, that mother, why doesn't she shut up? And can't she just let her son be a hero? I mean, I've heard all these things.
After the original false narrative and all the investigations that left so many of her questions unanswered, Dannie Tillman says that for years she was a kind of conspiracy theorist and actually believed that the Army had orchestrated her son's death.
I thought that they planned to have him killed. I thought because he was speaking out about what, he was unhappy about things, that they thought, well, he's not being a benefit to us. And it's because the pile-on of lies was so outrageous that all we could think is, well, they've got to be covering up something worse than an accident. Like, why would they go to this trouble to cover up a mistake?
There was a perfect storm of mistakes, misjudgments, and a failure of leadership that brought us where we are today. The facts show clearly, and I've walked through them in the course of my remarks, that there was no cover-up.
Pete Geren was Secretary of the Army in 2007 and conducted a review of the investigations into Pat Tillman's death and its aftermath. Geren left the position in 2009 and hasn't spoken publicly about his work until now.
You very specifically said there was no evidence found of a cover-up. And I know this is semantics to some degree, but what's the difference between intentional deception and cover-up?
We found people who had engaged in deception. We found people who knew the truth and looked the other way. If someone wanted to call that a cover-up, I saw it as, when I think of the term, we called it as we saw it. People lied. You can call it whatever you want. They lied.
How did those lies, how did that misconduct tarnish the legacy of Pat Tillman?
Well, people have conflated what happened after he died with his death. Pat Tillman died in the line of duty. Pat Tillman volunteered, left everything important behind, and was killed in the line of duty. That's a story right there. And then there is another story about how the Army failed his family. That's a different story. And they need to be separated.
Among those in the Army High Command, only General Philip Kinzinger, who was already retired, received a public censure and reprimand for failing to inform the Tillmans that friendly fire was suspected and for lying to investigators. But at the platoon level, there was considerable punishment, including for the 4 soldiers who fired in the direction of Pat Tillman. 3 were kicked out of the Rangers, among them Steven Elliott.
What you guys did was later characterized up the chain of command as reckless. But what else could you guys have done?
I think everybody in that platoon has spent 20 years asking that same question of themselves. Because you realize that while the decision to fire is a pretty important one when you're talking about a friendly fire incident, you realize that there's a whole other host of decisions being made that you had nothing to do with, right? And if one of those decisions had been made differently, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And so every squad leader in that platoon they've spent 20 years asking that same question.
The soldiers point to decisions made at battalion headquarters to tow the Humvee and split their platoon for leading to Pat Tillman's death.
The blame clearly lies on the shoulders of the people who made the decisions that put us there. And it's very same people who have done everything in their power to shift that blame to somebody else. And the man that commanded the battalion has done nothing but try to shift the blame of his failures to other people.
The battalion commander was Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Bailey.
Colonel Bailey, the battalion commander, what kind of accountability did he take, responsibility for what happened?
My opinion, none. You know, for me, as long as I've been in the Army and the Ranger Regiment, you know, I wish he would have had enough courage to stand up, you know, and say, hey, I'm overall responsible. Because again, he is the battalion commander. He should be the same accountability. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm like, you put me in that situation.
Our attempts to reach Bailey and Kinzinger were unsuccessful. McChrystal declined our interview requests. He would eventually become one of the most senior leaders in the Army.
General McChrystal did not receive any kind of punishment.
No.
Why not?
The investigation didn't find that McChrystal had committed any wrongdoing.
He did sign off on the Silver Star citation and send the P4 memo, say, don't let President Bush describe this as a death caused by enemy fire. That doesn't constitute wrongdoing?
The investigation that I led, that we conducted, it was thorough. We were all aware of what was at stake, and the legal proceedings that we have in the Army decided who was at fault, who was culpable, who made mistakes, and then they were punished. And I have confidence that the soldiers who were punished, the officers who were punished, would commensurate with their failures.
For many of Pat Tillman's platoon mates, what happened on April 22, 2004, and the way they were then treated by the military would take a profound toll.
Many of them went through the same thing: depression, drinking, broken marriages, broken lives, addiction, and then the suicidal thoughts, real suicidal thoughts. Like guys telling you, I can't tell you how many times I put the 45 up to my head with the hammer cocked back.
Every year when I get a calendar, I put Pat's name on the calendar. The month of April for me also is my birthday, just a few days before Pat's death. So it's very difficult.
I have probably thought a million times this world would be so much better if Pat had made it and I had died. That was always my go-to, like survivor's guilt. It's just, I miss him. Every day, I think about him.
I was drinking a lot. I got to a point where I just didn't want to be alive. And it's not because I didn't have things to live for. It's just because I had these wounds inside of me that I didn't know how to get rid of them. I didn't know how to fix them.
How would you characterize the way it has affected that group of men over the last 20 years?
Catastrophic. Catastrophic.
Annette Hill is a psychotherapist who counsels veterans. Her husband, a retired Ranger, was with Pat Tillman's platoon the day he was killed. But she asked us not to identify him.
The aftermath of this particular event is it continues to run deeper than I think maybe it needs to. Grieving is very paralyzing for some people, but unless you can accept and move through grief, you really stay stuck in an event. And I think for this specific event, I do believe that people are stuck.
When it first occurred to you that you had fired toward Pat Tillman's position, what do you remember thinking?
I felt like I felt numb for a long time because I didn't know how to process that until that emotional dam kind of started to burst. And then I became very angry. I was angry at our chain of command for obvious reasons. I was very angry and very confused for a lot of years, but really I was just operating out of my own pain. I was operating out of my own guilt, my own shame, and really just feeling the weight of this horrible thing that you've been a part of.
I hear guilt and shame, and that is the hallmark of moral injury. People are carrying around an awful lot of shame that probably doesn't belong to them.
No psychological wounds heal without truth and community. They never had truth. Most were never allowed to see the investigative documents. They didn't know all those facts.
Many of the Rangers who for so long have suffered say Pete Blaber's investigation has helped them by setting the record straight about who was most at fault in Pat Tillman's death. Blaber also helped convince Dannie Tillman that what happened ultimately was a mistake.
Now that you think that this was the result of bad decisions, not a conspiracy, but that those people who made the decisions have been spared any kind of serious repercussions, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm angry about it. I'm still angry about it. I mean, there's no contrition. They've never apologized to us. They've never apologized to the soldiers that they gaslighted, basically, into thinking that this was all their fault.
What's your message to Pat's platoon mates?
I just hope that whatever memories they have of what happened, that they can try to let it go, because they have a life to live, and Pat would want them to live that life, and he would. He would have been very forgiving.
What is clear is that 20 years after his death, Pat Tillman remains a constant presence in the hearts and minds of those who served with him and those who loved him.
What do you want Pat's legacy to be?
That he was a human being, And he was funny and he was smart alecky and, you know, I mean, he was just like everybody else. He died, but he died doing something that he volunteered to do.
How do you try and get into somebody's head and figure out how they would want to be remembered? We say patriot? Can we say hero? How about just a great human being? How about we start there?
How can we learn to take responsibility, forgive where we need to forgive, repent where we need to repent, and live each day with the appreciation that it's a gift and that there are people like Pat that aren't here to live it. It doesn't honor them to live in anger or guilt or shame. It honors them, I think, to try and take what was bad and dark and help something good come from it.
I don't know, I get a lot of satisfaction out of, like, you know, my family being proud of me, my brothers, you know, I care what they think and how they feel, and I want them to be proud of what I'm doing. I want to push myself, you know, I don't necessarily want to be, I think you got to get out of your comfort zone. If you're kind of comfortable all the time, you know, it's like if you're skiing, if you're not falling, you're not trying. You know, so I kind of want to push myself a lot. Stupid motivation, but that's mine.